Good afternoon, Kane and Ash. First of all, I would like to say welcome to my studio, which is actually not my studio, it's your studio. But thank you for having me in today. What I'd like to do, if possible, is just give my audience just a little bit more sort of information about what it is you do and how you help online businesses or businesses in general increase their visibility using podcasts.
Do you want to take it?
No, go on, mate. You start.
Oh, very kind. Right, so we run Progressive Media, the UK's largest podcast agency. So our focus is building people's authority. Generally, we work with entrepreneurs rather than people doing passion projects.
Yeah.
And podcasting is really cool because it's just a time saver. It's what attracted me to it. So if you want to post on social media, you can't turn, short form into long form. Mm-hmm. But we do a podcast called The Podcaster's Podcast twice a week, 15 minutes.
It's taking you 2 minutes to plug our podcast. That's impressive.
And the business. Anyway, and the top link in the show notes. But so it's half an hour of content a week, but that's enough for us to post that onto, 60-second or less clips onto Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. Every platform. Full length we could use for YouTube if we wanted to. Using AI transcription, we can turn that into blogs or, newsletters, chapters of books. So that podcast is just really easy to sit down, talk to somebody like we are now for, half an hour, and just rinse that for all sorts of content. I think as a online business owner, like you can run ads, and ads are important earlier on because content marketing isn't going to change your business overnight. You're not going to get loads and loads of money overnight from content marketing. But also you don't want to be, as a business owner, reliant on ads. You want to get inbound leads, and the longer and more frequently you create content, the more that happens, the more you will wake up to a DM of somebody saying, can you help me? Or listen to the podcast and somebody emailing in saying, can I buy your product? Not only that, creating brand is essentially the reason you can charge more. Like if you just run ads and you haven't built a brand, you are limited to how much you can charge. But a brand is the difference between a Primark top and a Gucci top. The exact same thing, but a couple of zeros on it. So we help people build their brand, become an authority in their space. Generally, we work with quite quirky and niche podcasts. That tends to work better, actually, and help them grow their brand across all channels.
Yeah. No, that sounds great.
It is great.
I was going to say, to add to that, the biggest thing with podcasting, when you take out the social media and repurposing element, is just a podcast audience itself is typically more valuable than any audience you find online, right? Because the people that, say you're a business coach, and the sort of people you want to target, people that are busy in their business, are probably not going to have 45 minutes to sit there scrolling or 45 minutes to watch a YouTube video. But what they do have is a commute to work, or what they do have is music on in the background on radio, which could be a podcast. So it's because it's passive consumption, you can do it while you're busy. You attract a much more sophisticated audience, if you like. And I think if you was to go to any, I don't know, not any, but most millionaires, self-made millionaires or billionaires, and ask what sort of content you consume, I reckon a lot more of them would consume podcasts than they do TikTok, for example. So if you're wanting to get in front of a really high value audience, and you can only choose one type of media, then podcasting just does make the most sense because of the sort of people you get in front of. It's all about who rather than how many.
So a lot of the clients that I work with, they're perhaps a little bit tentative when they're looking at how they're going to launch their business and things. What I would like to know is, because you chaps are quite young, but you are smashing it in this area, this game. So what I would like to know, or our listeners to know, is just a little bit more about how you both got started and how you've now come to run the UK's largest podcast agency.
I slept with somebody to get to the top.
Yeah.
Nothing about that surprises me.
No, so Progressive Media is a arm of the Progressive conglomerate, massive company in the UK. And they're an education company, first and foremost, started in property. So one of the founders, Rob Moore, who's got the Disruptors podcast, he started as a property investor, did really well there, started teaching other people to invest in property, and then sort of went into the business space, and then retired 12 times, come out of retirement 12 times, and then started his podcast in January 2016. What he realized was, I need not jack of all trades, but I need audio engineers, video editors, social media, people that are really good, if he's going to take this seriously. But then what he also realized is one podcast didn't take up the 100% of the time of all of those people. So he started a podcast agency as an entrepreneur, smart, saw some waste and then monetized it. Now, this is going back quite a few years, but when I was doing my GCSEs, I worked at a Costa drive-through and I used to serve him at like 5 a.m. in the morning. Like, he was active, but he would come around, one day in a Porsche, one day in a Ferrari, one day in a Lamborghini. It's like, well, what the fuck does this guy do? And he, wore this shirt that said Disruptors. And then I would speak to him because he tipped well at Christmas. And I asked what he'd do. And he'd be saying, like, I'm going on this shoot. I'm going to interview X person and Y person. I'm going to see David Goggins. Oh my God, like, this is awesome. So through uni, as soon as I decided, like halfway through, this isn't for me, I dropped him a message. So at university, I did digital marketing, although I outsourced a lot of it. I went to Lincoln. It was a lot of independent places. So they needed like websites or basic social media stuff. So I just go to door. I did a lot of nightclub events and marketing for that. So I kind of DM'd him as soon as I decided I didn't want to use my degree, saying, here's my skill set. And it just sort of happened to coincide at the same time that he'd built this agency because he wanted to minimize waste of, like, he just wanted a podcast. He'd retired. Like, yes, it was a business for him and it makes a substantial amount of money, but it's a fun thing for him to do, right? So he didn't really want to run this agency. So then I essentially came in a few years ago and we worked together, and now he's not involved at all. He is now treated as one of our clients. So much so that one of his companies, which is his personal brand, pays us, and we have to negotiate that every year, which is interesting. So 3.5 years ago, I joined, and been running it since.
Well,
From my point of view, it was a little while after, so I knew you before, didn't I? We were working together before, and I'd also done I was self-employed, kind of drop shipping online, so I'd done a lot of Facebook ads marketing. I was 18, running my own business, selling sunglasses, watches, all these sorts of things through Shopify, through Facebook. And then I'd done a little bit of selling windows as well, and that's where I met you. And then stayed in contact, and essentially it started to grow and grow, and you were like, look, and looking to bring someone else on. And I'll be honest, I'd probably listened to 2 podcasts before I'd actually started here, but the opportunity came up, I joined, started learning very fast. And the thing is, when you're surrounded by editors, producers, and then people that are kind of experts in the space and clients, you pick it up really quick. So spent the first however many months just learning and picking stuff up, and now 2 and a bit years later, here I am.
Awesome. So if you don't mind, Ash, I want to pinch one of your questions, if I may.
No worries.
Why start a podcast in 2024?
Oh, straight from the Facebook ads.
I did like it though, so
yeah, good.
I think it's never been easier to go viral on social media.
That's literally the first line of the ad that you say as well. You can't just copy it.
Of course I can. But so for context, we pull out ads from our podcast episodes. One, because it's just a bit different. But 2, it's much easier to do that than just say something to camera. But I do believe that, which is why I said it. It's never been easy to go viral. Like 5, 6, 7 years ago, it'd be like LinkedIn was written posts. Instagram was highly edited photos. Facebook was 10-minute videos or written posts. TikTok didn't exist. Right? So everything required something different. Then TikTok come along, completely disrupted social media. Now everyone does TikToks, but they call it something else. So podcasting, long form content, it's very easy. Like, I'm dyslexic, so writing's off the table. Like, if we're doing emails, we're doing ad copy, Ash writes it. But also, I find it difficult just to speak straight to a lens. And the time it takes to retake, it's easier just to do a podcast, go through 20 minutes of content and be like, edit this, take that bit out, loop that there, and then great, you've got something that sounds coherent. So I think most people find it easier to speak than they do write, especially when they've got somebody like a guest to bounce off of. So repurposing content makes it easier to go viral. I think that's the main reason. Second reason is what Ash mentioned to start with, which is it's just a much more valuable audience. The average net worth of somebody listening to a podcast can be far higher than your average social media user. It's also a much more intimate connection. Like on social media, if you scroll through TikTok for 5 minutes ago, what was the last 5 videos you watched? You'd be like, I don't know. Let alone if I said, what was the name of the creator? Tell me one thing about the creator. But if those of people listening to this, I was going to say if they listen to podcasts, but this is a podcast, and clearly they do.
Are you listening?
Yeah. So, but if you're, well, I guess it could be a clip. But those of you that are listening to podcasts regularly, if you've got your favorite show, you will know things about your host that if you met them in the street, you'd be able to hold a conversation. Maybe what they do for business, a funny story from their background, you know, their spouse, name, things like this. Because every episode you'll say things anecdotally.
Yeah.
I've actually had that a few times where I've been texting out like a client or someone in the progressive space, and then they'll say something. I'm like, wait, what are you on about? And it won't make any sense to me. And they'll be like, you know that thing you said in the podcast? And I realise they're referencing a joke. I think one was talking about Thailand because we'd been to Thailand, and someone said something about that, and I was like, what on earth are you talking about? And then they was like, I heard you say it in the podcast. I was like, oh shit, yeah. So I forgot that goes out there for people to listen to.
How do you know?
I should probably consider that more, actually. With the shit
That time you was with a ladyboard, or what?
yeah, wait, did I say that?
So, repurposing in time, 1. Building much deeper connections with your audience, it is 2. And 3, there's less people doing it now than there were a few years ago. Right, through lockdown, loads of people were doing them just because they could, and then we could go to the pub, and we don't fuck that. And to be fair, I know which one I would have picked at the time, and there's more listeners, more sponsors, and less podcasters than 3 years ago. Plus, with the help of like all these AI platforms now, like how long do we spend planning an episode? Right, 30 seconds, if that. We recorded yesterday. We did 3 episodes. We walked in. The first thing we say every time is, "What are we talking about?" And either
Can we get Alex to give us some ideas?
Yeah.
Actually, as well?
well, like Alex will give us an idea, and he did. So like, great, we'll do that one. Or normally what we'll do is somebody will ask us a question, sort of speaking to clients or leads and things, and we'll WhatsApp each other. Or you can use things like Google Gemini, or you can go to a Facebook group in your niche and be like, "Well, what are people searching for? What questions are people asking?"
Yeah.
And then, because we know the answers, because this is what we do for a living, we can just rattle it off. But in the instances that we don't, so there was Patreon is a membership site that we recommend. So if people want sort of subscription for extra content, generally they use Patreon. Now, one of our editors has actually been a podcaster and been podcaster on Patreon since 2016. Okay. So he knows more about it than we do. So then when there was an update that there was a bit of uproar about, it's like, oh, let's ask him. So we use these sort of AI platforms to plan our episodes, or we can just answer it. If we don't know it, we go find somebody who can. So we spend seconds planning.
Yeah. Sometimes we manage to integrate it into recording as well, like yesterday. I had an idea halfway through an episode, so I stopped listening to it, pulled out my phone and wrote down the idea. So that was quite handy. It's not the first time I've done that either, because the amount of times you get an idea and you're like, oh, I need to write that down. You don't, and then we sit there and like, shit, we had an idea, but we've forgotten it. So write them down whilst we're recording for the next episode. So that's at least one we have pre-planned for the next time.
It's true. I think if you've got a business that, especially where you are the product in a way, like if you're a coach, consultant, courses, other businesses as well, but specifically those, you're not going to get more high quality leads than through podcasting. And I know, like, we run ads, we do emails, we do social media, we do podcasting. Yeah, you know, like, and it's the highest revenue stream. It took 7 days after our podcast to get our first client. Now, that's not going to happen to everyone. Yeah. There's luck involved. But post 7 TikToks in a row and see how many, 5-figure leads you get. Yeah.
It's not going to happen, is it?
Well, so I actually, it's interesting. So I started new social accounts on all of them. We like to put our money where our mouth is a little bit, and we tested it. It took 200 and something days before I got my first message on TikTok of somebody going, oh, maybe interested in what you do. And don't get me wrong, I have had a few leads off social media, but it happens on podcasting quicker because it's just better audience. You're giving more valuable content, easier to stand out because there's less competition. But because it's long form, you sort of get to know them a bit better.
No, I like that.
Clip it for the ad.
Anyway, to be fair, we spoke about it in a recent episode. There's a lot of benefits within podcasting that aren't direct. Like you think, cool, get clients or make money or position yourself as an expert. That's the one you didn't allude to as much. But also, if you want to be seen as the expert in your space, podcasting is great for that. But our ads, so we run ads, and what we've done, so that one we thought that makes sense for an ad. But since then, we've tried a couple more, which is actually the TikToks that you've posted. We've gone through the analytics. Cool, which one has the best retention? Because that's the biggest thing with the Facebook ad. Like, engagement isn't so important as retention is when you're talking Facebook ads. So it's like, cool, which one has the best retention and is general enough to show to a cold audience? Yeah. And I think we tested 2 of them, and our cost per lead went down about 30% really? since running that as well. Yeah. And we've still got re-edited versions of those viral clips to test again. So we've used our organic content to become our paid content. It's like trying before you use it, because you can sit there and try all these different ads. But if we just go through the page, well, we know this one works because it's already worked. Now let's just put ad spend behind it and it will perform well.
No, I love that. That's great. So I know we discussed this a few weeks back when I was here last time. Some people struggle with literally looking down a lens and talking, which is one of the things that I do. I can know what I want to say. I start to look at the camera and
throws you off, doesn't it?
It does. So what I have been doing is so with my videographer, I will try and talk to him behind the camera as one way to get over it. But I know you have different ways how you started the podcast. Do you want to just kind of go into a bit more detail about that, and maybe it's people who are a little bit camera shy?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just start an audio podcast. Yeah. I think so. We've got a podcast about podcasting, so you'd think we'd go hell for leather from get-go. So I've helped other people, but I've never run my own. I don't know how much time it's going to take. So for the first 50 odd episodes, it was audio only. Yeah. The other thing, I think with anything, you make it as easy as possible, right? So if I'm at the moment, we're trying to be more consistent in the gym. So it's like, okay, we make sure we go together because it's easier, and then we put a penalty in if you don't go. So it's just about making things easier. So with the podcast, it's like, well, you got to research all the equipment to get. You got to learn how to use it. I get shy in front of the camera. Podcasting is probably the least technical way you can build your brand at the moment if you start with audio only. Yeah. Because most people, they'll start at home, virtual, using Zoom or Riverside, and you use a mic, a USB mic that plugs into your computer. And you're already used to using Zoom or Riverside is better for podcasters, but Zoom, you press the record button on Zoom and you're done. Like, that's your podcast. So we did 50 episodes audio only, built it into my routine, so we were showing up every week and we got used to it. And another way to make it more, or another way to keep you more consistent, is you can play with the format. So generally, it's Ash and I. We've also done solo episodes, and sometimes we do interviews. And sometimes it's the both of us interviewing someone, or sometimes it's just one of us. And if early on your audience knows that, if you've done 200 interviews in a row and suddenly you just start doing solo content, you're probably going to lose some listeners. But if you can mix that up and people get used to that, and your length, the consistency of the length of the episode is about right, people don't mind. And that means you can stay consistent because it's not a burden. And then when you get a bit more confident, you can turn on the camera. Because when I started, I was way more introverted. So I did audio only. And no, I wasn't posting on socials, wasn't doing any of that. We didn't, at the time, there was no face on the artwork. You joined. We put face on the artwork, both of us. Not long after that, we turned on the camera. Then, not long after that, we started posting to the socials. And, you just sort of do it baby steps.
Grow into it, right? I mean, I remember my first few I recorded. I think I recorded a couple with Tom.
Yeah.
And I was just question mark. So I was sat there. In fact, stood basically where you are with my phone with like 4 or 5 questions. And he's talking. I'm listening to nothing he's saying.
Yeah. Because you've got your list
just
of questions.
Like, right, next question is this. He could have told me the most groundbreaking thing ever. And I'd be like, cool. So why should you start a podcast? It was exactly everything against what you teach, but it's easy to sit there, and I knew it was wrong looking from the outside in. But when you're in that position, it's quite difficult, right? And it's like, when you're on stage talking at the events we do, it's like, I'd be able to pick up on something you do well, something you don't do so well. If you put me on stage, I'd probably do all the things that I know are shit, because I'm not used to public speaking. I've done it a couple of times where we've done like Q&As, and you feel yourself getting more comfortable. It's just a case of doing it until it feels right, or if it's shit on video because you're not doing it properly, don't do video until you're comfortable. And now we record it, but we forget it's recording. Basically, we just have a conversation when it's just us two recording, and that's the stage you want to get to, that you just don't even consider the tech that is there.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's like 6 lenses pointed at us.
Yeah.
And 3 people. But you kind of forget, because I haven't looked over there once. Like, you just look at your guest.
Yeah.
I haven't got much choice, by the way. I'm looking at
Yeah. You all look lovely. And it's, if you're doing virtual, like, you have to remember most people do their content at home. You're just looking at the person on Zoom.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a lie. You're probably looking at yourself in the little corner, which is what most of us do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you don't sort of realize the camera's there. But even so I do a lot of public speaking, do a lot of content. I still stumble when we do direct to camera stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have tried recording ads, and literally, I mean, Ash this outside this room, there's like a massive whiteboard.
Yeah.
And we've got this main lens in the middle. I put the whiteboard behind it, and I put bullet points, because as soon as you go action, how do I speak?
Yeah.
And you forget what you're going to say. So I think podcasting is sort of a bit of a cheat code that it just feels like a chat, and you can ignore the lenses. Microphones don't seem scary. Cameras seem scary. It's a bit weird. Do you know what I mean? When a microphone's in front of me, I don't feel like, I'm not sure. But if a camera's in front of me, it makes me feel a bit more awkward.
Yeah.
Do you know what I noticed as well? I found this when we recorded with Dodge, and he said this, is his guests open up a lot. The guy's podcast, Eventful Lives, is talk to a lot of like SAS, military, talking about PTSD, and really deep topics. And he made the point, which I completely agreed with, is him and his guests have headphones on. When you've got the mic there and the headphones on, you're listening through that. It's almost like there's only you 3 in existence. Well, for us it was 3. When he normally does it, it's 2 people. Yeah. It's almost if you forget everything else. Now, we don't really record with headphones. We're lucky enough. We've got Alex with the headphones on, checking levels. But I did like that concept of when he sat down talking with his guests, they get really deep and talk about things, they open up that they wouldn't normally. But it's almost like you're in a whole different echo chamber when you're like locked in with your earphones on and your mic, and you forget it's being recorded. It just, when you get used to it, it just feels like it's only you two that exist. And it's so easy to go. People open. I think that is why people say things they wouldn't normally say when they're on a podcast, especially when you're like in that zone with your headphones on.
100%.
Yeah. So somebody who's already sort of like an authority, but they haven't launched a podcast, appreciate you have services that you offer and provide for various people if they want somebody to take on the running and the complex stuff. Do you want to sort of give a little bit more about that, but also what people should be looking for if they are looking to join an agency?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on 2 things. So first of all, you need at least one of these 2 things to do a podcast, which is time or money. Ideally, both. But as a minimum, you need both. If you've got no time and you've got no money, don't bother. Right?
What about a microphone?
Huh?
What about a microphone?
Yeah, you need to commit to starting first. We kind of accommodate to those 2 people in the sense we have training for people who have time, where it's lower cost. We teach people how to do every step of podcasting to learn how to do it themselves. And then we have the agency where we do it for people who don't have the time but have the money to invest. Yeah. So that's the overview of what we do. We either do it for you, take care of like show notes, titles, editing, uploading, all the boring stuff, or we teach you how to do it all yourself.
Yeah.
Great job, pal.
Anything to add? Or
No, you're good. No, you're good. It's pretty spot on. Yeah, I think here's something to look out for, even if you're not using us, which dumb if you don't. No, I'm joking.
I use them, by the way.
Yeah. It's the whole jack of all trades thing. Yeah. It's, if anybody has got an amazing copywriter who's an audio engineer and a great videographer that knows how YouTube works, podcast works, and social media works, send them my way. Yeah, send them my way, because I'll pay them. Never seen them. But we have videographers, we have editors, we have show note writers, and then
designers.
Designers. And it's such a massive representation of you. Like your podcast, it seems like quite an intimate thing. It's a reflection of you that you need to do each step properly, especially if you're trying to sell something. Yeah. So if you're trying to offer somebody like coaching, but you're audio shy, so most people think how you do anything's how you do everything. Or if that's their first impression of you, they're going to judge that. So if, the design looks like it's been made by a 3-year-old, or, there's really bad audio quality, so I'm not going to buy your products or services because you just look sloppy.
They're the most frustrating people as well, right? You speak to these people who are like, clearly, like you said, an authority. and they want to either grow that more, they want to have content out, they get more leads in. But their approach is like, oh yeah, I'll wing it for a bit, and then if I need the help, I'll get you on board. And you're like, okay, but you want to be seen as an expert. You only have one chance to launch. You want to do it properly, and if you position yourself as an authority, saying you are the guy or the woman in this area, yet it looks and sounds shit. It's almost like going to the gym and be like, I'll tell you what, I'll use a PT, but let me lose some weight first, and then I'll start using the PT.
Yeah, once I've got the result, then
I'm gonna. So once I launch a successful podcast and then start making money, then I'll go on your training to find out how to make money from a podcast. Hold on, what? So that approach of it's a bit different when it's a hobby, it's podcast. And I do ask people that question all the time. Like, is this a serious business project or is it a hobby? Because if someone says to me, oh, it's just a hobby, but don't spend thousands, and they've got no intention of it being more than a couple of months or whatever, you don't need to spend thousands at learning and getting people to work with you on it. But if you're trying to grow a business off it, or you're using it to grow a business, you position yourself as an authority, then don't say, oh yeah, I'm taking it seriously, but I'm going to wing it to start, and then look for help once I've started getting success, because it just doesn't make sense.
I think it's, especially with editors or people doing social media or YouTube, you kind of need somebody who spends a lot of time on the internet. Yeah. And culture matters. Like, one thing I've seen with people that use sort of overseas cheap VAs is they don't get it, if that makes sense. Like, they could be a great editor, highly skilled, but they just don't get what clips are going to get a reaction, or it doesn't like I think so. Producer Alex, 2 people today have said he's like a meme machine. Name a meme, he'll find it. And it works really well on our clips because it's content that people like and engage with. And I've seen people that have done fantastic documentaries, like unbelievable videographers, but would get 6 views on TikTok. Just because it's different style, and that's okay, but you need to make sure that you're hiring somebody that's good at the job they're doing. And if you want a certain result, you kind of need to make sure that they're built for that job.
I think that's funneling through to TV ads as well, because TV is like the most corporate of corporate, right?
Yeah.
And you've always had these unbelievably high production TV ads, but no one. I couldn't tell you specifically about any, but I feel like cars do it the most.
Yeah.
And then recently, you just get the most annoying, stupid TV ads, but you remember it. The We Buy Any Car. I'm singing that theme tune in my head all day long. Like their whole, I'm not going to sing it.
You've got too much time. Go on, sing it. Go on, sing it.
But they've got the most ridiculous ad where they just start singing a We Buy Any Car song. And I remember sitting there with my dad. I can tell when it's a good ad because it'll piss him off. He'll sit there and he'll be like, look at this effing shit. It just gets really, really annoyed by stupid shit on TV. And I'm like, that's why it works. Because now you remember it.
Did you just say effing shit?
Yeah, I know. I wasn't sure. It's not my podcast. How many swear words can I say?
After. Go on, sing the Go Compare tune.
Go Compare?
Yeah.
That's not the one I was talking about. I said
no, there's another one. You'll know it. It doesn't matter. I'll move on.
Go on. You can.
No, it's fine. We'll insert it after.
But yeah, anything that has that catchy, and you see it come through to TV now. So many ads are just like ridiculous. Domino's have a stupid one at the moment, but it's like people on a football pitch and they leave the game to go and eat Domino's. It's just ridiculous.
You watch too much TV.
I know. You would never have seen it a few years ago.
I was thinking, I didn't know all these adverts.
It's my hobby. But it's kind of flooding through to the most corporate of media, which shows that having that fun, like relaxed side is just working.
100%.
Yeah. One thing I would like to touch on, if we may, is monetizing a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a plethora of ways that you can do that.
There is. Here's another one of ours, I think. Right.
Yeah.
So, the main way somebody should do it, if you can, is sell your own stuff. So this is what we said to clients all the time, right? If a sponsor, which is another way, is going to pay you £1 to get in front of your audience, they're making £2. They're not paying you out of goodwill. They're doing it because they're making sales. Why not you make the £2? And if you've got a product, or so it's like, for example, we've got our podcast training and our podcast agency, so it makes sense we do a podcast about podcasting because that's going to attract our ideal buyers. And we do actually have a sponsor, but they approached us. We've, in 2 years, we've never bothered because the whole point of it was to sell our stuff.
Yeah.
And that sponsor is, considering the amount of downloads we get, is a very high paying sponsor as well. Yet we've made more in the last 2 weeks through clients coming from our podcast than that entire sponsorship deal.
Well, you did a 30 grand sale, didn't you?
Yeah, well, hey.
Well, there you go,
That'll do it.
yeah.
But-
So the sponsor hasn't paid us 30 grand. believe it or not.
yeah. So it's right. Sell your own stuff. Number one. Sponsors, as long as whatever they're selling doesn't conflict with what you sell. Affiliates, YouTube revenue. Now you've got things like creative funds, like TikTok. If you hit a certain criteria, will pay you £1 per 1,000 views.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound like a lot, but when people are posting multiple times and getting big views, which you can on TikTok, then paid speaking gigs is a big one for podcasters. That's people don't expect until it happens. But how many coaches and consultants or like people that are in weird niches do we know that, a year after podcasting, they're getting booked? Because somebody that he's left us now, but he was running our events, Alex, before he was with us, he was filling big sort of SaaS corporate events in Vegas, like massive, like thousands of people. And he was in charge of booking talent. So he would just go to podcasts, type in the topics that they needed, would find either a host or a guest and be like, shoot him a DM. Do you want to speak at this event? Because it saved him loads of time. That's a big one. Merchandise, I guess, selling tickets, membership sites. I mentioned subscription earlier. There's all sorts of ways.
The best ways are indirect, though, like you say. And we've had a few people say to us before, it's like, I don't see it as monetizing a podcast if it's not direct. I was speaking to some property investors the other day who have a podcast. I was like, we've got like 6 figures worth of investment for our property investing for our podcast. We want to monetize it. I was like, well, I mean, would you rather £2,000 of sponsorship, or would you rather £200,000 of investment for you to go and spend and make way more on the back end? Like, it doesn't make sense to me, that approach. Why not use it as a shop window, which is often how we refer to it, right? For your coach services, or if you're in property to get investors. Using it as a shop window will always make you more money, essentially. You're always going to make more indirectly. So people get caught up in the, how do I monetize the podcast specifically? It's like, actually, position yourself as an expert. And if you've got something that exists already, then you're already one step ahead of everyone. It's just a case of getting more people aware of that thing and the right people.
There are definitely more complex ones. Like we've got a couple of clients that have had airlines in the in-flight entertainment that they play podcasts. We've had a few clients have their show on there. Radio stations pay them, especially, can you believe, like in Australia, there's a 24/7 health and safety channel. And Colin, because you met him, but so he gets paid to have his podcast played on sort of the later dead hours, essentially, of this radio station when they don't have a host. But he's like, well, I've already done the content. Stephen Bartlett, he's got his new book, and who did 4 Hour Work Week?
Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss, his Tools of Titans book. It's just look at the podcast, which one's got the most downloads, take one learning from the top episodes, turn them into chapters of a book, whether they wrote it or a ghostwriter, I don't know, and then sell it back to the audience. Tim Ferriss made $5 million from a book that was just old podcast content. Yeah. There's clever ways to do it, but Ash is right. Just sell your own stuff. You make way more money.
Yeah. No, that's definitely the way.
Is that how you're going to make all your millions go?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Insert ad here.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. So what is next for Kane and Ash? What have you got coming up in the pipeline? Are you allowed to share?
Thailand for New Year's Eve.
Yeah. Can't share that yet.
Not confirmed.
To be honest, just more of the same. Yeah. Personal goal anyway is just grow the brand. Yeah. I think corporate brands are dead. Company brands are dead. People want personal brands. People want to see founders, especially founders, building in public. And that is warts and all, mistakes, wins, challenges. And not only is that the more trending thing at the moment, and you'll get more engagement by doing it that way, also it means you can pivot. So you might start doing X in your career and documenting it. And it's important to share some personal stuff as well to sort of pad out the content. But then in 2 or 3 years, you can start talking about why. And then, but those followers are going to stick with you, or those listeners are going to stick with you. And then I feel like a lot of people go through seasons in life. And then each season when you might be doing a different thing, pivoting, you've still got that fan base, that audience, which means when you launch a new thing and you pivot, it's going to be successful much quicker. That's why you see so many businesses, like your first business is going to be the hardest. Your first million is going to be the hardest. And you see these founders sell a company and the next one they do seems to be an overnight success. It's because they've got all the connections. They've probably already got customers. They already know all the mistakes. It just makes things so much easier. Whereas if you spend all your time building a company brand and it's all about your company, well, you can't take that with you. If you exit that business, those followers are gone.
Yeah.
That has to stay with it. But you couldn't change it anyway. Like, for example, the Progressive Property, one of the channels to look after, which is one of the other progressive companies, like, that's faceless. There's lots of hosts. But that doesn't do as well as the personal ones, like what we put out.
Yeah.
Right? Because people like personal things. But that podcast could never be anything more than Progressive Property.
Yeah.
Because there's not a person behind it, so you can't pivot it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Would you be happy to share, no names, but anyone who's joined the agency who has had the best sort of sponsorship deal while working with you? Would you be happy to share that?
So, what do you mean by best? You mean most money, or like earliest on, or best brand?
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah, I think there's different ways you could.
Well, let's throw one out there because it's a particularly fairly recent one. It was about 6 months ago, maybe a bit more. Someone sat our training, which finished on the Thursday and closed a £5,000 sponsorship by the Friday. Hadn't even recorded an episode yet.
Yeah.
Didn't manage to do a big launch like we wanted to because they had to get it out there ASAP.
Yeah.
And now they're looking to relaunch soon. But there's still probably people on her that was on the same training as her who are now going to go, nearly time to launch my podcast because I've nearly got the name right. So she didn't have the name right. She made a load of money from sponsorship. She sold a load of her own product. She's been booked to speak on like 3 or 4 stages in 6 months.
Big festivals as well.
Yeah. And now she's going to get the name right. But she just done it.
She's awesome.
So that's a great example of getting sponsorship straight away. Like literally, I finished the training and got sponsorship the very next day.
I would say biggest pre-launch sponsor we've seen is 25 grand. That's for 6 months worth of sponsorship. But again, an episode hadn't been recorded. The biggest sponsorship deal would have been close to 200 grand. That again was for 6 months, that was Rob's, that was Disruptors. I'd say that. I've spoken about that publicly before.
Yeah. So I'm just going to make a note that you said you can get me 100 grand, yeah?
200.
200, yeah, why not? Let's go with 250.
Yeah, round it up.
This is the new money back guarantee.
Cool meal for 2 friends?
Yeah, no, exactly. Is there anything else you want to answer?
No, hopefully we've given you everything you wanted to know, and hopefully your audience found some value in what we had to say.
Yeah.
The only real plug that we'll do is what he done in the first 10 seconds, which is, if you get the chance, have a listen to the Podcasters Podcast.
Yeah.
Good place to find out about how to start one.
Yes, and any links?
That one, and then if you want to find us personally, you can go through and find...
Kane Baron Official.
Oh, yeah, you have a fucking tag that goes across all your channels, don't you?
Yeah, smart that.
Ashley Morris on LinkedIn, you probably find me on the Hampson one.
And so modest.
Yeah.
No, but what I would like to say is a massive thank you for allowing us to come down today.
Thanks for travelling.
Well, it's been a long one. Just come from Kent. So yesterday driving down from North Lincolnshire down to Kent. Cool. These guys drove from Birmingham. Now they're going back there, which is a bit closer. But yeah, I'll be back up to North Lincolnshire.
I appreciate it.
No, it's been great. Appreciate your time. And again, thank you for coming to my new studio.
Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, it's lovely.
Do you like it?
Yeah, it's nice.
No, that's great. Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Chad.
Thank you very much, Gav. Been a pleasure.